Hello, hello. Uta Hagen here of Trans Widow Uta Hagen YouTube channel and WordPress blog, utahagengrasswidow.wordpress.com. That is always down in the notes with a contact form if you wish to let me tell your story through my voice. Now, I'm excited because in the Johnny's seeds, I have the most beautiful alpha calendula seeds. I had bought Orange Flash, which I thought was supposed to be brighter orange, but it did really put out those colors last summer. And but I really want that bright orange. I think I'm just going to stick with that for the calendula. I did manage to dig up one kind of frost-bitten calendula just to see what it will do inside as a houseplant. It's sending out lots of leaves, and I will let you know if I get any flower buds. So this episode is my response to Kara Dansky's response to the executive order regarding federal policy that there are two sexes and sex is binary, and we're not going to issue passports with X where the sex of the passport holder, excuse me, is supposed to be. So, I'm not going to go through all of the executive order. It basically abolishes the advocacy at the federal level to have men who say they're women go faster up through the ranks in these jobs, and is changing policies regarding, drag queens in various federally supported, federally funded areas as they were during this previous administration, with having something drag queens, in the military going out online and all this. Oh, yes, I do want to point out, if you look carefully, you can see my asparagus fern is sending up a shoot, and this I have never shown before. That is a clay statue that my younger son made for me when he was in pre-K in 1996. This would have been then May, because Mother's Day is the second Sunday in May, I think. And that was the first introduction I had, despite the fact that it was even before Nettie had his operations. That was my introduction to the concept that my sons are going to make two Mother's Day presents and give one of them to Nettie. And so that was really the beginning of the erosion of my role as mother. And Nettie particularly refused to have any references to Father's Day. So being that we didn't live geographically close to my parents, my sons felt especially bereft on Father's Day. And I invented Future Father's Day brunch, and I took them out and I told them they could order any big sloppy thing, waffles with ice cream on them or whatever. And we talked about what our fathers, and avoided the subject of Nettie and his abdication of fatherhood. And now, sad to say, my children are in that millennial generation who has decided not to have children. And so that's the case with many of us who are in our 60s, whose children have decided not to have children. So that's the other cultural, detail that comes to play. I always hoped that that my children would have children, um, and that, I knew I would just be the best grandma. But anyway, I will be a surrogate grandma to whoever I can draft into my social circle. All right, so here's Kara Dansky talking about the executive order regarding sex and the binary biological reality of sex. So, what does the new executive order do and not do? First, a few limitations. The executive order does not and legally cannot touch state law. So, my hopes, of course, that trans widows would once again have the right, if they have children, to be the only mother listed on the children's records. Certainly for my state, New York, and certainly for California, this executive order is not going to help us. It can easily be undone by a future administration, but apparently it is anticipated that there could be some codifications in law, certainly in certain states. It does not amend any existing federal statute. Statutes, including the Violence Against Women Act, that enshrine gender identity have not been amended by this order. None of these observations are meant as a criticism of the executive order, says Kara Dansky. They are simply acknowledgments of the limitations of federal executive authority. The order has 8 sections. 1, purpose. 2, policy and definitions. 3, recognizing women are biologically distinct from men. 4, privacy and intimate spaces. 5, protecting rights. 6, bill text. 7, agency implementation and reporting. And 8, general provisions. The purpose is a general statement about the importance of acknowledging the material reality and using language that reflects it. Now, I'm hoping that this means the next time I go to the gynecologist, I don't have to fill in that box that says whether or not I regard myself as gender fluid or non-binary. But I'm in New York State, so who knows? It does not explicitly condemn the ability of men to gain access to intimate single-sex spaces by use of other means, such as use of wrong sex hormones and surgeries. It acknowledges the importance of using federal policy on truth. So I think what it basically does is establish a foundation that we have to start talking about male and female and the biological realities of the sexes, the two sexes. The second section establishes it is the policy of the United States to recognize 2 sexes, male and female. These sexes are not changeable and are grounded in fundamental and incontrovertible reality. Again, I think that just to have this language at the federal level is significant for us. It defines women, woman, girls, and girl to mean adult and juvenile human females, men, man, boys, and boy to mean adult and juvenile males. And the usual thing about what is a female and what is a male, depending on which gametes your body produces or has the organs to produce. It also establishes definitions of the phrases gender ideology and gender identity. It says gender ideology replaces the biological category of sex with an ever-shifting concept of self-assessed gender identity. This is very good language. This will help states as they fix what the public policies are. it gender identity permits the false claim that males can identify as and thus become women and vice versa, and requiring all institutions of society to regard this false claim as true. So that's the definition of gender ideology. It includes the idea of a vast spectrum of genders. It's internally inconsistent in that it diminishes sex as an identifiable or useful category, but nevertheless maintains that it is possible for a person to be born in the wrong sexed body. This was done well. I am very curious to know, whose language this is, who is the real author. And further, defining gender identity reflects a fully internal and subjective sense of self, disconnected from biological reality and sex, and existing on an infinite continuum that does not provide a meaningful basis for identification and cannot be recognized as a replacement for sex. I just found out that Brianna Wu's original name was John Walker Flint. Kind of interesting. Like, why take W.U. Wu when I'd assume that he knew that gender woo is a phrase that we gender critical women use. Anyway, that was from a commenter on some other channel. I'm just glad to know those little tidbits because Brianna Wu is presenting himself as, one of the reasonable ones, which I'm sure that my ex-husband could suddenly adopt the same so-called moderation, even though he was totally radical in the 1990s because he was pushing for all these changes and certainly wanted to coerce and manipulate me. Okay, the third part of this executive order, recognizing women are biologically distinct from men. Secretaries of the State and Homeland Security and Director of the Office of Personnel Management, which oversees the general operation of federal employment, will implement changes to require that all government-issued identification documents and personnel records accurately reflect the holder's sex. Now, I happen to have had information going way back into the 1990s that that was sort of the beginning of the field of library science being absolutely captured by gender woo. I don't know what it is about the overrepresentation of librarians, but there has been, for example, a cluster of men like Nettie in the Library of Congress. They're probably all retired by now because this was information I got from someone who was a historian and had direct contact with them in a project of hers. She knew that while conducting some projects in the 1990s that took her over to the Library of Congress. And interesting how she just knew who they were. Oh, yes, and one of them just seemed really unhappy and crabby, and he wasn't fun to deal with. Okay, it requires all agency forms needing an individual sex list male or female and not request gender identity. So this is a model, and we can hope that at least in some states where common sense prevails, that this will, trickle down. In this particular instance, I think I do believe in trickle down. Okay, it requires agencies to take all necessary steps to end federal funding of gender ideology and to issue guidance to correct the previous administration's misapplication of the Supreme Court's decision in Bostock versus Clayton County. And I think that was this, I can't remember now if it was some dude like Nettie who wanted to wear a skirt to his funeral home job or something like that. Unless it was the cake case. I don't know. Privacy and intimate spaces. After this, I'm going to stop and I'll do the rest of them in part 2. Okay. This section requires the Attorney General and the Secretary of Homeland Security to prevent males from being housed in women's prisons and detention facilities, including, where necessary, amendments to the implementing regulations of the Prison Rape Elimination Act, which were promulgated in 2012 and permit men to be housed in such facilities under certain circumstances. A lot of this did come from Obama, who had a lot of his political funding early on in Illinois from the Pritzker family, James Jennifer Pritzker being one of the heirs to that family, who is a nettie and promotes all of this and donates money to, pretty sketchy things like a clinic in Detroit that is collecting children who are growing up in impoverished circumstances and recruiting them to be trans. It prohibits the expenditure of federal funds on medical procedures designed to conform an inmate's appearance to that of the opposite sex. Generally, it requires agencies to effectuate this policy by taking appropriate action to ensure that intimate spaces designated for women, girls, or females, or for men, boys, or males, on the other side, are designated by sex and not identity. Now, this is a first step. I caution everyone that it is not the end of the road. Things are not going to suddenly come tumbling down in trans world like a house of cards. There is going to be very, very stiff pushback, and it's basically not going to change. It's not going to tone down. But what this executive order does is give the public the language to tell the truth and the support to know that this is the policy of the federal government. I don't know if it will help trans widows at all. Let's all work on that through our various channels. Take care. I went out skiing. It was so fun. It's the first time in 2 years. We didn't have enough snow last year. So I hope to get out in the warmest part of the day. When I woke up, it was 2 degrees, and I think it's going up to 18. But 18 is skiable. We didn't get quite enough snow. Oh well. I'm managing. I might literally shovel snow into a wheelbarrow and carry it over to the bare spots on my little trail in the curated woods. See you the next time.